Dave, in trying to discern reality through all different mechanisms, I've hoped over my life that metaphysics and a study of that could be a way to discern questions. Science is one thing, I was trained in that, but I've studied a lot of metaphysics. And when you did this famous survey of 1,000 or 2,000 philosophers on all of these critical questions, there was such diversity, it was kind of depressing that there's not common thinking among people who think about this so hard. So does that undermine our confidence that philosophy and metaphysics can help us understand what's going on?
Well, you know, philosophy is hard and philosophers disagree. That's not really news. So my colleague David Bourget and I decided to do this survey to find out and to quantify all this. How much do philosophers really disagree? And we asked 30 questions about some of the biggest questions in philosophy. And we asked philosophers to give their opinions. Mind, physicalism or non-physicalism, God, theism or atheism. We sent this out to 2,000 leading philosophers and half of them answered. We got a pretty good answer set. And we found on a lot of questions, physicalism 56%, non-physicalism 28%.
So you're in the minority there.
Yeah, but on the other, it was a much bigger minority than quite a few people expected. Do numbers exist? Platonism, 48%. Nominalism, 49%. That one was really close. One of the stronger leanings was theism, 13%. Atheism, 73%. Many more philosophers are atheists. But we know that all of these questions are going to generate disagreement. And one of the reasons is the following. Once you get agreement on a question, or once you get a method for generating agreement on a question, we don't call it philosophy anymore. We call it science. And many of the sciences split off from philosophy. Physics split off from philosophy. Newton called himself a philosopher. Sure. After Newton, it was physics. Psychology split off in the 19th century, linguistics, economics. So philosophy is kind of by its nature this too hard basket of questions on which we don't yet have a consensus.
So use the two examples you gave where you have a very high percentage who are atheists, 73%, and 12, 13% who are theists, and yet between physicalism and non-physicalism, you're almost equal. So I assume that the ones who are the theists obviously are part of the non-physicalists, so we can subtract them out. But then that leaves about 35% or something like that who are non-theists, who are atheists, but who are also non-physicalists. So that's an interesting character.
We got 28% were non-physicalists, and about half of those were theists. So there's about 14% of the population is atheistic non-physicalists. And that's incidentally where I find myself. I am myself not a theist, but I am not a physicalist either.
So who else would be in that category? It's a very interesting category.
Oh, I think a lot of the philosophers who think about consciousness are driven there by non-theistic considerations. My colleague Tom Nagel, for example, would I think call himself a non-theistic, non-physicalist. For me, the reasons that drive you against physicalism about consciousness don't have much to do with God. They just derive from the elementary observation of consciousness. Religious people go towards non-physicalism maybe for different, maybe convergent reasons, but I think the two don't need to be tied together.
How about the Platonism that abstract objects are real, there are real numbers, there are real forms, and nominalism, which means that that's just not real, that's just conversation and all of that. What's the articulation between Platonism and nominalism and physicalism and non-physicalism?
Oh, we have the data on the correlation between all of these questions and a bunch of little 2x2 matrices for each of them, but I couldn't tell you that one off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that Platonism, there's at least a positive correlation between Platonism and non-physicalism and between nominalism and physicalism. Nominalists and physicalists both tend to be like, all there is in the world is this stuff. Those spooky non-physical entities don't exist, whether abstract objects or minds, but that's, on the other hand, it's just a correlation. There are plenty of people who are Platonists and physicalists, and there are plenty of people who are dualists and nominalists.
Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. I think there are different issues. Are abstract objects physical, and are minds physical? And you can say yes to one, but not the other.
So you can have, you can believe that minds are physical and abstract objects not physical. So you're not. Are you a physicalist? You're a physicalist with respect to mind, but
Yep.
you're not a physicalist with respect to the reality of abstract objects.
Yeah, I think there's a respectable view which is non-physicalist about abstract objects, but physicalist about the mind, and vice versa. I see physicalism primarily as an issue about the concrete realm and not the abstract realm. So I'm not sure that being a Platonist is really inconsistent with physicalism in that sense, but they're all respectable views.
But at fundamentals, you're asking what is the structure of all reality. There's no limit to this. You have to include everything.
I gotta say, I didn't conduct this survey in order to find the answers to that question. I don't think the best way to find out the structure of reality is to take a poll.
Right.
It was just sociology. It wasn't exactly philosophy, but it does tell you something interesting about the sociology. It does also, at least, maybe should give us a little bit of pause once you see how much disagreement there is about these questions between extremely smart people, maybe preventing us from becoming overconfident in our views about any of these questions once you realize just how many very smart people disagree.